everyone! I'm doing another TikTok challenge today. This time, it's making an OC based on your favorite animal. And my favorite animal is a violet-backed starling. So for this doll, I thought it would only be fitting to use Twyla from the Monster High line. Her skin is purple, so I think that's perfect. Starting off the prepping process, I have to cut off all of her hair first. Her hair is really nice, but it is also very sticky from all the glue that's melted out of her head, so it's best to just remove it. I cut it down as short as I can get it, even going in after like that, although it doesn't help all that much. Then I remove her head and then go in with a pair of needle nose pliers, basically dragging it around and pulling out all the plugs. Once all the hair is removed, I can use 100% acetone to take off her face. The blue stripe across her face made this part a little longer because it kept smearing everywhere, so I had to wipe it up all the time. But I did get it done eventually. And part of this challenge is giving her horns, so I start sculpting some chunky horns and sticking them onto her head to get the indentation, and then just pop it off and set it aside to dry. And since I suck at symmetry, one of these horns is going to be shorter than the other, and that is on purpose. I didn't have any purple chalk pastels, so I kind of had to get creative. I started out with blue, and then I was going to put red over it, but when I started putting the red over it, it started to look more like bruising than blushing. As you can see here. I also put it on a bit too heavily and also smeared all the blue chalk pastel around. But the parts that did mix look like very, very bad bruises, so I did eventually wipe that off and choose paint instead to blush her face. Here's the version with paint. I think it looks much better. And her horns had dried overnight, so I put on a spot of glue and then stick them on where I had marked it. I set this aside to dry so that the horns aren't moving around a whole lot, and when they are dry, I go in and start painting the scalp and the horns. I lay down a base coat of white first because honestly, if you're doing anything, I would always recommend putting a base coat of white on because it'll make your life a lot easier, especially when you're going to be painting with lighter colors. Now I'm just color blocking her scalp. This will tell me what colors of hair are going in which spot. The horns are just going to be simple gray so that they stand out against the hair and the face. For some added detail, I paint a lighter color at the top of the horns and just blend it out with the rest. I call it done on the horns for now and focus on the face instead. I paint in the whites of her eyes first, as always. I make her eyes a contrasting green color. After looking at many pictures of a violet-backed starling, most of their eyes are green or yellow. So I paint her eyes green with yellow in the center blended out. Her eyes are now colored in, but they also look terrified. So I go in with a black outline around her eyes, adding a bit of eyelashes. You can see a bit of my hair popping into frame here as I focus on painting in her eyebrows. They're going to be half purple and half white. So I put down the purple first, then add white. I made them half and half like this because after making her hair purple and white, I was deciding on whether to make her eyebrows purple or white. I just chose both. For her lips, I mixed purple with pink and used that for a kind of nude lip. Then I put a black line through her lips for details and paint feathers around where her sideburns would be. These get covered up later, so this is a big ol' waste of time. I use glossy varnish over her lips and eyes, just to give it a little extra shine. I paint from her knees down gray, and I also paint her forearms gray because of the gray pattern that's already on there, and I couldn't use acetone to remove it because it would just melt the plastic. So I just painted the rest of it gray because it would look like the bird's feet and also bird hands, I guess. I also blush around her knees with more purple paint, and another part of the challenge is to add scarring. So I add some scars on her leg. These are actually referenced from my own scars, and I do the same with her forearm, with scars from my partner's arm, and also literally just a missing finger. And before you say anything, 1, I didn't do this. She came like that. And 2, none of those are self-harm scars. The ones on her forearm are from burns, and the other ones on her legs that are from me are from a car accident. I also paint her nails black, just change the subject here, and pop her head back on once I'm done. Moving on from that, I start gluing on her hair wefts. I start with the white first since it's on the bottom, then moving on to the purple once the white dries. Actually, scratch that. Before I put the purple wefts on, I heat up a butter knife with an iron and move the white wefts into place, and the heat just keeps it in that place. Also, before you do anything like this with yarn, always test whether or not the yarn can actually take the heat, because otherwise it will burn and you'll have to do it again. Now I can start putting the purple wefts on. It looks a bit ridiculous right now, but it all comes together in the end. Just like that. And I haven't styled her bangs just yet, and I also have to, cut all that down, because that's a bit ridiculous. I was going for sort of a Pearl haircut, Pearl from Steven Universe. I think I did a pretty good job, but her bangs are going to be something completely different. I'm just going to section them apart and then glue them onto the sides of her head, because otherwise they wouldn't stay there. And this is what I meant when I said the feathers around her head, or the sides of her head, would get covered up eventually. Yay, wasting time. I definitely should have done this part earlier, but I build up a plateau on her back using some clay so that her wings will sit better. Also, yes, she's going to have very large wings. I sand it down and then paint glue on top of it so that it'll stay on her back. It's just a bit of extra reassurance. And here's the skeleton I choose to use for her wings. This first draft was made out of popsicle sticks. I do end up changing it later, but I figured I would leave the process in here. So as you can see, I'm not using a drill to make the hole, because honestly, a drill would crack the popsicle stick way too easily. So I slowly use bigger tools to sort of make the hole. It's just a bit easier. Also, if you're doing this for yourself, do not force the tool through, it'll crack the stick. And here are the points for the articulation. I just start sticking these together. Once the skeleton is all put together, I take some purple cloth or fabric, and I made this wing pattern based off of it. And so I just need to trace it and make 2. Fun fact, this fabric is actually an old t-shirt that I don't wear anymore. Free fabric. I take the odd shape and put it over the fabric. I made some holes to go in the screws, and then I just glue the fabric onto the skeleton. Make sure you let this part dry thoroughly because the glue will try and soak through the fabric, and it's just better and easier if you let it dry first. And I paint the popsicle sticks black to blend in with the feathers. Although the feathers are where everything starts to go wrong. I decide that for flexibility, I'm going to make the feathers out of foam. I paint them, I cut them out, it takes a while, and it doesn't matter in the end. I lay them out in the pattern I want, and I sew them on, again for flexibility, because glue would make it way too stiff. And these do need to be able to open and close, which again is where the downfall is. For the feathers that are going over the popsicle sticks, I do glue those down because you can't really sew through wood all that easily. And I don't feel like doing it, to be honest. For the backside of the wing, I paint it gray so that the feathers will blend in more. And if you want to do this, I would recommend trying to find a different way of doing it, just because you'll see. I add feathers over that part too, and now arises the problem. When I close the wing, part of it sticks out, either from the back or from the front, so it's not going to work because it looks very strange. If you watch Delightful a lot, you'll recognize this pattern from her Nova video. She didn't end up using this wing pattern because she didn't like it, but personally I do really like it, so I'm going to make it. I cut the pieces out of foam, which I do wish I used a stronger material as foam is pretty flimsy, but making the hole in them for the articulation is very easy. I just took a screwdriver and put it through the hole a few times. Then I block out where the feathers would be. I'm not actually adding anything, it's going to be all paint. I looked up some reference images for violet-backed starling wings, and I'm going to be using these ones. So the inner part is going to be completely gray, while the outside will have a bit of gray, but it will also be very colorful. After all the paint has dried, I put in the screw again, or the bolt, whichever one it is, I'm not actually sure. Then I paint the bolt black so it blends in. I use epoxy glue to glue on the wings, and then paint over that clay. I didn't show the gluing process because epoxy glue is a bit dangerous and I wanted to do it right. But yeah, I blend out the clay part, and then I can now focus on the clothing. I used this shorts pattern and just traced it out onto some black fabric, originally using a pencil, but that didn't show up, so I used white chalk instead. Once both pieces are cut out, I fold them in half, then put the two together, just like this. Turn that right side out, and boom, pair of shorts. Good to go. For the shirt, I originally cut it out of this purple fabric. This won't last long though. Then I use a Sharpie to trace it out. I wanted to be fancy, so I painted a white border around all the edges that would be visible, and I'm so concentrated on it that my head is continually poking into the camera. After that's all dried, I made sure not to do too much so it wouldn't be stiff. I fold it over and sew along the edges. Then I gather up the sleeves and try it on the doll, only to see that the neck area looks pretty weird because of the gap I had to leave in the back for the wings, and so, you know, she could actually put it on. So I scrapped that and used this pattern instead on some white fabric. The straps will basically make it so that this piece of clothing is sewn onto the doll, but I don't really have much else of a choice because of how big her wings are on her back. And I also cut a cloak out of that same fabric from the shirt from earlier. I cut the bottom to look like feathers, then take it apart, and I think it looks pretty good. Then I cut a slit in it so she actually put the thing on. Then I have to cut another slit, but not all the way through. This one will drape over her wings so, she can wear it comfortably. Then I paint a white pattern on the front. This is kind of mimicking the white on the bird's belly on the actual bird. I also do kind of like, not a gradient thing, but it kind of looks like it's glowing now. And I paint a darker purple around the edges, add a snap, and extra feathery details. I also glue a button on over the snap. I tried all these things on the doll and realized I don't like the shorts, so I threw that away, not really, I'm saving it, and made some out of this dark purple fabric instead. Now I can move on to accessories. I make her a bow, carving it out of a popsicle stick, then reinforcing it with glue since it did crack a little bit, and I just wanted it to be stronger for the future. I also glue on a little piece of string. This is just regular thread, so you can't pull the string back to shoot something. Then I paint the wood brown, to make it a bit darker to match the doll. She, of course, is also going to need a quiver of arrows, so I cut it out of this faux leather and sew it up like that. And I also make this belt out of leather. I made that a different time. And I paint over it with a purple, though it just kind of looks like a black. Then I paint a little feathery thing on the edge of it, then sew it on and add a button to the belt. For the arrows, they're just made of cardboard, and I just painted them to look like arrows, even adding little feathery details. The final details are just some jewelry. I take some bracelets, paint them white first, then paint them pink and blue, which I think I actually forgot to film. Then I take 2 pins, paint those blue as well, and just stick them into her head. I needed to use pliers for this. And she's done! I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll have a short coming out with the TikTok with the actual challenge so you can see what I had to add. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!